Widener, Reality Check. We're back reading from the book, Monument to the End of Time, which I just checked on Amazon right before I got on here. And a copy of this book is now going for $44,800 and change. I'm astonished. It got up to it when I first started reading, it was $750. Then I checked about 3 weeks ago and it was over $2,000, and now it's $44,000. So that is unbelievable. But I am talking to my producer about putting this out as an ebook, and we're going to be working that out as we go along. Also, I'm putting out the commentary to the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like when you get a DVD and the director has a commentary, well, I'm going to be putting out on Reality Check a commentary on the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, telling you all about its esoteric meaning. Very interesting. All right, so today we are now going to a new chapter, now chapter 5, and this chapter is called The Hermetic Pope, the Knights Templar, and the Gothic Renaissance. This is section 1. This is the alchemical transmission and the recovery of the West. Okay, here we go. Having examined the first 1,000 years of alchemy's history, it's time to take stock of what we have discovered. The earliest surviving alchemical texts all have pre-Christian Gnostic associations. The Emerald Tablet inclines towards Greco-Egyptian Gnosticism as its source, while the Isis the Prophetess story suggests an Egypto-Hebraic origin. The connection point is ancient Egypt. Zosimus informed us that alchemy derived from the wisdom of the pre-catastrophe offspring of semi-divine beings and humans. In ancient Egypt, these beings were known as the Heru Shemshu, or the Company of Horus, the followers of the widow's son. The Isis the Prophetess story is our last unitary text of the ancient wisdom. In it, we can identify the major alchemical themes and preoccupations of the next 2,000 years. Alchemy, as Isis the Prophetess tells us, is composed of an interior psychosexual transformation, an exterior elemental transformation of matter, and a transformation of time itself. In the collapse of the ancient world, this unitary view of alchemy fragmented into several parallel currents. The physical transformation process was seen as separate and became confused with metallurgical and protochemical trickery. The internal transformation became the basis for the experimental mysticism or Gnosticism of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. The secret of the transformation of time, the advent of the kingdom of heaven, became the inner core of early Christianity. Unfortunately, this vision was co-opted and debased by the imperial church into an ongoing apocalypse against heretics. In Judaism, the secret of time was intimately intertwined with the work of creation, the ability to animate matter. As we saw in the Bahir, Jewish mysticism remained intact, a major portion of the secret. With Islam, the split began to widen even further. The secret of time, which lay at the core of Muhammad's revelation, was retained as a family secret among the descendants of the Prophet. The internal transformative processes became the mystical practices of the Sufis, while the external transformation of the elements became one of the cornerstones of Islamic science, along with medicine, astronomy, and mathematics. Within Islam, threads of all three transformative processes can be found, but never as one unitary system. By the late half of the 10th century, this separation had reached a kind of maximum dispersion. The secrets of the Bahir were known only a few small groups of Jewish mystics, mostly in Spain and Palestine. The Islamic mystics were just forming the early Sufi orders, while the Shiite owners of the inner secret were trying to conquer the Islamic world. Christianity, of course, had persecuted its alchemists and Gnostics out of existence, leaving a shroud of darkness over the entire 700-year period from the fall of Rome to the Crusades. Learning in the West sank to a level above superstition. Such scholars as there were, Pope Gregory the Great, 490 to 504, for instance, dwelt mainly on ecclesiastical matters with an amazing credulity for tales of marvels, miracles, and the possession of man by demons. Beyond such writings, there were only confused compilations from fragments of classical authors, variously and often wrongly ascribed. They were the crumbs of ancient wisdom that nourished that dark and arid age. This sad state of affairs began to change when the Muslim Arabs and Moors entered Spain from North Africa in the 8th century. Islam, seemingly endowed with an insatiable curiosity for foreign learning and guided by a truly oriental imagination, in sharp contrast with the passive intellectualism of the West, revitalized the civilization of the territories it conquered. Europe was saved from this fate by Charlemagne's grandfather, Charles the Hammer, at the town of Tours in 732, but Spain became a Muslim stronghold. In the centuries that followed the Arab rise to world power status, its leaders, caliphs, and sultans and generals exhibited a great interest in learning and arranged for the literature of the conquered areas to be translated into Arabic. Much of the ancient wisdom was preserved in those Arabic translations. The writings of Aristotle, Archimedes, Apollonius, Euclid, Hippocrates, and Galen were all saved for the West, where the knowledge had disappeared by those Arabic collections. It was also through these Arabic sources that knowledge of alchemy was reintroduced to the West. We have already mentioned Jabir, an 8th century collector and interpreter of Gnostic alchemical texts, but of perhaps even more significance is the treatment given to the Hermetic arts in the great 10th century Arabic encyclopedia Kitab Fahirst. Several pages are devoted to various Hermetic subjects, including mention of the Egyptian chemies, the pre-catastrophe founder of alchemy, Hermes Trismegistus, and Mary the Jewess, Cleopatra, and Stephen of Alexandria. The Arabs, at the close of the 10th century, had created a perspective on alchemy that would color its subsequent development down to the 20th century. Muslim Spain served as a transmission point between Islam and Christianity. As the tide of conquest receded, pockets of Christianity remained and strongly formed into Christian kingdoms. Along with religious and political struggles, this close contact provided a convenient means of communication. After the Fatimids conquered North Africa in the 10th century, Arab Spain found itself even more isolated from the centers of Muslim life. The Spanish caliphs of the late 10th and early 11th centuries were concerned with staying even with or ahead of their Fatimid rivals, particularly in terms of culture and learning. It was from Spain, then, that Europe now drew the energy and knowledge needed to reanimate its civilization. Largely as a result of the efforts of one individual, Pope Sylvester II, in the early years of the 11th century, things had begun to change. Fueled in part by the apocalyptic yearning centered around the 1,000-year anniversary of Christ's death, popularized by Sylvester's students Rudolphus Glaber, the Christian West began to stir itself. The Church of Rome tried a few reforms, driven by the new and growing monastic peace of God movements. The most significant of all, waves of pilgrims took the long and dusty road to Jerusalem. Pilgrimage, journeys of repentance, and spiritual seeking had long been an important part of popular Christianity. But before the middle of the 11th century, pilgrimages to the Holy Land were rare. Starting around the magical year of 1033, 1,000 years after Christ's death, and continuing in an ever-increasing wave for the next 40 years, Jerusalem became the pilgrimage destination of choice. In 1071, the Seljuk Turks conquered Palestine, wrenching the Holy Land from control of the Egyptian Fatimids, who were sympathetic to the Christian pilgrims. The Turks, however, were not so accommodating. By the early 1080s, pilgrimage to Jerusalem had all but stopped. The few pilgrims that were allowed to visit the holy city were harassed, robbed, and generally treated as unwanted outsiders. Most authorities tell us that this was the motivating factor behind the crusading movement that would burst over Europe after Pope Urban II's call in 1095. The pilgrim impulse, by some sort of religious transformation, turned into a holy war. While there is a core of truth in this simplification, the real causes of the First Crusade are shrouded by the secrecy of deep political intrigue. From our thousand-year distance, these shadows are almost impenetrable. However, like the sudden appearance of a star through the murk of a cloudy midnight, certain events and personalities shed an uncertain light on the outlines of the Crusades' political intrigues. The most important of these events were the political conjunctions between East and West, begun by the Pope, the Emperor, and the Caliph 100 years before the First Crusade was announced. While it is true that the First Crusade was a pilgrim movement with Jerusalem as its focus, it was also much more. It was part of a vast plan conceived and carried out by a group of secret societies for the purpose of creating a world state in the Holy Land and thereby bring on the chilliest millennium of peace. At the core of all this intrigue, the heart of the secret societies lies alchemy. The Arab scholars and scientists had preserved the idea in some of the basic texts, but the rediscovery of the secret of how to make it work was the main result of the First Crusade's conquest of Jerusalem. To tell this deeply hidden story, we must go back and trace the tale of the emperor, the pope, and the caliph, and the true origins of the Crusades. And that'll have to wait until the next time we read. You can see how the thread of alchemy was in Egypt, in Greece, and then as those civilizations began to vanish, the Arabs were rising up. They copied the text into Arabic, and that is what the de Medicis, essentially in the 1500s, that's what those were the texts they bought and brought back to Italy and had translated into various European languages. So I know it's politically incorrect, but we owe a great deal to the Arab world for preserving these very valuable texts. I got a lot of them right there behind me. And I think our governments don't want us to know that this occurred in history. It's deeply hidden and no one teaches this in school, or at least they didn't when I was in school. I didn't find out about this until I was like 40 years old. So that is the transmission for today. I'm Jay Widener. You've been watching Reality Check. Please tell your friends, hit like and subscribe. And the book hit $44,000 on Amazon. I'm just completely blown away. Anyway, thanks for watching.
Do, 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 do.